Well, good morning, everybody. We'll kick off. I know pretty much everybody in the room, but for those who I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name's Mitchell Murphy. I'm the CEO of Longreach Regional Council. Can I commence today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today, and on behalf of Council, pay our respects to emerging leaders, past and present. So, first and foremost, a big thank you to everybody here. Thomson River Master Plan, it's imperative that we have extensive community consultation, and for those who weren't present, we had a fantastic engagement down the main street when we first kicked this off. So I just want to acknowledge a few people here today. So first of all, an apology from our Mayor, Councillor Tony Rayner, who unfortunately is out of town today with another commitment. But Councillor Leonie Nunn, our Deputy Mayor, will do an official introduction in a moment. Also like to acknowledge the presence this morning of Councillors Trevor Smith, Tony Emsley and Tony Martin, and we'd also like to acknowledge that we have our past Mayor, Ed Warren, with us, who was involved in this process when we first kicked off. We're also delighted today to have representatives from Urbis, who are the consultants that have put this plan together for us. And with us today is Glen and Mel Jones, so thank you so much for coming up to Longreach. Glen and Mel did extensive consultation yesterday with a lot of stakeholders, particularly government departments, Indigenous representatives and the like. Before I hand to Councillor Nunn, probably a little bit fitting and ironic that we're at the Hall of Fame. When you think way back when that vision was there, which obviously is a big signature piece of infrastructure to put Longreach on the map, the magnitude of this plan is probably a similar proportion. So you have to start somewhere and you have to go on that journey. And before I invite Councillor Nunn forward, the thing that's always most excited me about the Thomson River Plan is that it delivers on two things, and that is that it enhances our livability for our residents and future residents, and it also provides a wonderful stimulus for economic development over the next 20 years. So without further ado, please make welcome Councillor Leonie Nunn.
Good morning everyone. Thank you Mitchell. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome again to everyone. Lovely to see so many people here. I have to read, I've got a very bad memory. Now, it is with pleasure that we present the draft of the Thomson River Master Plan, a plan for the future of one of our greatest natural assets, the Thomson River, the lifeblood of this town. This plan is aspirational, visionary and long-term. We have listened to the community's aspirations for our river precinct, and this document reflects those aspirations. The plan speaks to both locals and visitors alike, to the livability of our region and to tourism. Council is acutely aware of ratepayers' concerns regarding the budgetary implications of such a plan. Council will undertake what is feasible and affordable. A plan such as this will rely on grant funding and private investment to be implemented. This is a long-term plan, a roadmap as it were, and a journey, and Council will be taking one step at a time. Thank you to Glen and Mel from Urbis for developing this plan, and for the positive engagement that you have had with the Council and with the community. Thank you everyone. I enjoyed the presentation from Glen and Mel. Back to you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Before I bring up Glen, I'm sure that he'll elaborate on this, but just a very quick insight into Urbis. They are an internationally award-winning firm. So, for example, they have done the master plan for South Bank in Brisbane. They are now heavily engaged in the transformation of Victoria Park. They've done the complete redevelopment of the foreshore on the Fitzroy River in Rockhampton. So their work is world class, and we're in very good hands. Over to you, Glen.
Thanks, Mitchell. Good morning, everyone. I don't want to cover the ground that Mitchell has already done too much, but just wanted to thank Councillors Nunn, Emsley, Martin, Smith for being here today. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your time over the last 12, 14 months. Thank you for your time on Thursday as well. And also to acknowledge Mitchell Murphy, Kimberly Dillon, Simon Kudner, and Holly White, who have been incredible help to us throughout this process, who have been massive advocates for the project, have really helped us through this process and been, I guess, a really good conduit to the people of Longreach. It's certainly helped, and to Bo Dillon as well, because if we end up getting into trouble today, I'll just have this cute little kid in front and your hearts will melt. So, in terms of the master plan, a little bit of background. This was all meant to be done within a 3-4 month process, and obviously COVID got in the way. It's sort of, obviously it's a bad thing that COVID happened. I'm not sort of advocating for that being a good thing, but from a design and master planning process, what it did do was it allowed us more time to think about the process, the design. It allowed for further engagement, of which, in terms of engagement, I've probably never been involved in a more engaging process before in my career. It's been a wonderful process. I mean, it's enriched our experience, really got to the heart of who Longreach is, what Longreach represents, the people that are here. So we certainly appreciate that. So the last couple of days we have been pretty busy. We've done this presentation about 4 or 5 times. We presented to Councillor Rayner, the council team on Thursday, and we got some really good feedback. Yesterday morning we presented to the officers, council officers. Once again, our presentation was refined, and we also got some amazing feedback from the team, from a maintenance perspective, operational perspective, which was brilliant. And then that rolled into a meeting with the local government teams as well, and then the third presentation was with the local business leaders, tourism operators in town, which was another really good meeting. And our final meeting yesterday was with the Indigenous groups around town as well, which was also great. So it was a very big day, and we're a little bit weary, but hopefully we've saved our best to last. In terms of, most of you are probably aware of some of the background and been keeping tabs on how the project's been progressing, but just as a little bit of a reminder, this is the area for the master plan. It's an opportunity to explore the potential of the Thomson River, understand what value revitalisation can do for the broader township. Despite the fact that we were looking at the broader Thomson River, it's a 4-kilometre stretch that we have been focused on. Currently it's underutilised. Oh, sorry, hold on, I need to keep moving that. I might sit down. There we go. Alright, excellent. So, basically this is the project area. The focus of the master plan was to look at new and improved recreational activities for the community and attract more visitors to Longreach. And really, when tourists are in town, the real key focus for us was to essentially keep them in town longer, so there's more investment in the township. And I can't stress that enough, because I think what we heard, and I think that the power of the engagement process that we've been through is that this is a master plan for locals, first and foremost. We're acutely aware of the fact that tourism plays a big role in town as well, and not just, I guess it plays a big role within the broader context of Queensland and, I guess, a central Queensland tourism trip. So there's bigger things at play. But first and foremost, it is about the locals. There's a real passion for the area. There's a real love for the Thomson River, and we certainly acknowledge that. And part of our process really is to ensure that there is, I guess, with population decline as well, we see it in a number of different regional towns throughout Queensland and Australia, how we can potentially reverse that. How can we keep people that, if their contract's running out, how do we get them to sign on for another 2 or 3 years? How can we get them to ultimately raise their families here as well and not potentially move away? So, and that's why the focus has been on locals, but obviously it's about tourism as well, to make sure that there's greater investment in the city, in the town. So where we are in the process, the first process was site understanding and assessment. That's really about us getting a greater understanding of the site and the township and the issues. The community engagement was the session that was held in the Main Street last year, which once again was absolutely fantastic. Without the help of Kimberly, Mitchell and Simon, it wouldn't have gone as smoothly as what it did. But that was, I think if everyone can look around, then you can see these boards that are displayed around the room. High levels of engagement. We did a similar process for the South Bank Master Plan, and I guess on a per capita basis, we got just as much feedback as what we did for that process, which was amazing. And then that was sort of in the midst of COVID, I think. And so basically we went away, developed up a number of options, which has led to the master plan that we're presenting today. A couple of things about the master plan, just to, I guess, bear in mind as we go through this process. It's important to note that a master plan does certain things, but it doesn't do everything. A master plan is a long-term vision and strategic decision-making tool. It's a high-level document intended to set strategic goals and objectives. It provides clear guidance for future development outcomes. It prioritises investment in physical infrastructure. It's considerate of surrounding context, highlights the importance of place and character, and it's a place for council to demonstrate leadership. But what it doesn't do is that it's not a detailed design outcome, and it's not the final end game. So what we're presenting today, it's not a ready-made project. It's not there for $50, $60, $100 million investment straight off the bat. It's basically a vision that council and the community are aligning themselves to develop over a period of time. The ideas that are presented in here reflect that of the community consultation and what effectively we've been told. But it's by no means the final set deal. It's a plan, so it'll evolve, it'll change. One of the processes that we're doing that we undertook yesterday, which was really valuable, is what are the next steps? What funding is council able to secure immediately? What can they potentially fund in time? What are the further studies that need to be undertaken? These are all processes that we need to identify, essentially to get to an end game that may be 10, 15, 20 years' time in development. There we go. So just touching on the stakeholder engagement, obviously there's been a lot of engagement with local groups. The process that we undertook once we were commissioned for the project was to undertake a number of different key stakeholder engagement meetings. And these were really important because obviously it brought to light potential conflicts in terms of what the master plan was setting to do. We needed to understand what the concerns were of the local groups, and this probably couldn't be more important than the local business and tourism operators. This was a great process because what it allowed us to do is understand what we shouldn't propose. We don't want to be proposing concepts and ideas that fly in the face of existing sort of competition in a commercial sense. It allowed us to actually focus on ideas and concepts that would help promote and aid those businesses at the same time. We were able to meet with land management agencies and Indigenous groups as well. So once again, that all happened last year, but we also caught up with those groups yesterday and went through the detailed master plan with them as well. So, and look, without getting, I guess the summary, I suppose, was that everyone is very supportive of it. obviously we've got some feedback, and there's an opportunity for formal feedback from those groups, which everyone, the entire community will have that opportunity as well. But it was heartening to hear that there was general support for the master plan. Obviously some changes and tweaks and ideas that were put forward to us, which, it's not perfect at the moment. Our role is to go away and amend this master plan in response to the feedback. So once again, what we're presenting today is the final outcome for what will be an endorsed master plan with council. In addition to that, there's been newsletters, fact sheets, community survey, which was all like a resounding response, which was really positive. These are the community engagement boards, and in the reality of these boards is this almost became our return brief. It's not so much us flying in and telling everyone what we think is the best idea. Our role is to really listen and I guess reflect the desires, hopes of the community. What was so amazing about the engagement process was that we had so many young people there as well. So it does really reflect, I guess, a whole view of the community. We felt people of all ages, lots of children, lots of young families. It was really open to everyone, and that probably identifies why an inflatable water park ended up the top response with over 100 responses. But this is a really simple tool that we use to really gauge the interests of the community and what the community is really seeking from a development such as this over the course of a 10 to 20 year time frame. So this just represents the top 15. As I said, the top idea was an inflatable water park at over 100. Water play, boardwalks, evening lights, stargazing, skiing and water sports, a dog off-leash area, regional playground, bike trails, pop-up markets, shelters, barbecues, a high ropes course, floating restaurant, a structured access point for swimmers, a beach or improved beach access and pedestrian trails. So not all of these ideas were implemented. A number of them were, I wouldn't say struck off, but there was some general feedback that we received quite early. The floating restaurant, because there's obviously some ideas that aren't feasible as well. So the floating restaurants didn't see the light of day, and there was also some feedback about motorised vehicles in terms of bikes and motorbikes, dirt trails, dirt bikes that weren't engaged with through council. So what we did out of that process was develop a series of concepts. In general terms, they were both fairly similar, but the one big change, which I think if you can see my cursor there, and if I just flip between the two options, you can see that they're pretty much similar in terms of the scale and the opportunities for recreation and amenity. The big difference was this central area through the middle here, and that was the first concept had like a multi-use sports park, mountain bike trails, motorbikes and extreme sports, because that did rate quite highly in the community feedback. But the rest of the elements about boardwalks, playgrounds, dog off leash, they're all they make sense as to where they should go, because obviously it's the Thomson River that we're celebrating, so there's some common sense responses there. But the main difference between this plan was the dominance of bikes and trails to concept 2, which was more around this centre of excellence, visitor centre, community centre, kiosk, sustainability centre, which Mel and I were quite passionate about, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail soon, but we see a great opportunity and I guess a bit of a gap in the tourism market as well for central Queensland, and I guess just a great way, an opportunity to help educate children and visitors, people as well about the region. So concept 2 was the one that was endorsed by council as the preferred option to develop into a master plan document, and that occurred sort of midway through last year. As we do with all master plans, we always establish a project vision and a series of principles or objectives that underpin that vision. So these are essentially our rule book or guidelines. Always sort of revert back to and say every decision we make is in support of the vision or in support of these objectives. So our vision for the Thomson River Master Plan, which can effectively change with response from the community. One destination with many experiences, centred on the region's most iconic natural asset, defined by a variety of land-based activities and opportunities to engage with the river. So with that vision, where are we? So as a delightful backyard for the local community, but as I explained previously, it's also a major attraction for visitors as well. So the objectives or principles that underpin that we want the Thomson River to have an identity. I don't want people to throw tomatoes at me, but I wasn't actually aware too much of the Thomson River before the project commenced. I was aware of the Qantas Museum, I was aware of Stockman's Hall of Fame, I was aware that the Dinosaur Museum was to be developed in Whitson, and maybe that's a failing of my primary school education in geography, but I guess there's an awareness issue there as well, and whether obviously it's really strong for the locals, but there could be potential identity improvements in the broader catchment around Queensland and Australia. An active and desirable place to be, a place for everybody, which is really important. So young people, seniors, families, really for everyone, all walks, shapes, and types of people. A place for education and learning, which we think is a great opportunity. An accessible, safe and connected precinct as well, making sure that it's like DDA compliant and ticking all of those boxes in terms of its accessibility. An adaptive and responsible place, and that's super critical because the world's changing so quickly, and what's relevant now changes in 6 months' time. We just look at how COVID has affected all of our lives as well. So it's about being adaptive and responsive to the place to make sure that we're moving forward in a responsible manner. So the way that the master plan has been broken up is essentially into 2 precincts, because there's obviously some private lots that delineate and split the 2 areas between. That's quite easily sort of summarised as the Western Precinct and the Eastern Precinct. You may be happy to know that the Eastern Precinct, it was certainly our preference, is to effectively leave it alone. We were lucky enough, Kobe took us up in his jet ski to the Eastern Precinct, and we got to look at it from the water. We got to experience it in Mitchell's car as well, in his Land Cruiser, and there's some beautiful areas there. The beach, when we first saw it, oh wow, you can formalise this beach and activate it with car parks and picnic shelters and barbecues and everything. But I think once we started speaking to people about what that beach represents to the people of Longreach, it's about, I guess, the simplicity of it all and the beauty of it, and we really felt as though the more that we untouch that area and just leave it, that doesn't, not to say that we may not put up a few shelters and bins just to ensure that the place becomes, I guess, more operational, but we really felt as though less is so much more with that Eastern Precinct, and really keeping it as a jewel for the people of Longreach and for locals to keep discovering into the future. But where the rubber really hits the road is in the Western Precinct, which is adjoining, I guess, that main north-south collector road and highway into town. So more intense activity, and this is the focus of providing facilities and activities, once again, primarily for locals, but also for tourists and visitors. We also split the precinct into 3, and look, I know it's all sort of up here on the screen, but the document does become publicly available as of today, so if you're taking notes, the document will be made available and you'll be able to have a look at it in detail later this evening. The precinct is split into 3. The river parkland, Riverlands, which is quite obvious, the area that joins and interfaces with the Thomson River. New recreation amenities of a regional scale for both the local community and tourists. And when we say regional, we mean of a stature that has regional significance. It's the ability to draw in a bigger catchment from surrounding areas, just in terms of how playgrounds potentially might be. Activating the river edge, creating the opportunities for people to explore, play and learn, and making the best use of the immense natural amenity that exists along the river. The second precinct is the Indigenous Heritage Trail. We see this as being a major tourism draw card to the region to complement the other regional draw cards in the region as well. I guess just very briefly on that, through our research and analysis of, I guess, trends and where the world's heading, cultural Indigenous tourism is a really big thing in terms of the tourism market. It's growing in stature and it's becoming more and more important. I do equate it back in real terms to, I guess, the way that our children are being educated as well in terms of the school curriculum. There's a lot of Indigenous education, a lot of sort of natural environment education as well. So our children are getting a great sense of, I guess, that part of our world and our history, but it's also, without being crass, there's also a big opportunity from a tourism market as well. Mel and I have done a great deal of sort of research and mapping the grey nomad routes and the tourism routes throughout central Queensland, and there is actually quite a big gap for Indigenous cultural education and celebration. So that's an opportunity that does exist. So what that can do is bring new tourism to the region and encourages longer stays on the back of other attributes that we're implementing within the master plan. It's not the only one. It focuses on rehabilitating the landscape while embedding a new layer of garden typologies throughout, and it's anchored by a new discovery centre, multi-purpose facility and education centre in the middle. The third precinct is what we're calling the Outback Campground, and we weren't concerned about this, but we obviously were interested to talk to the tourism operators yesterday, and there wasn't any sort of negativity towards it, which we actually thought was really positive, and we'll go into it in a bit more detail. But the intent of the Outback Campground is to essentially provide people with a different experience of camping, obviously with the tourism parks, and then the existing sort of trailer facility that's there. We really saw the Outback Campground as an opportunity to have people take swags out and put up their own tents, almost like a non-vehicular campground site. Obviously trails to get in and out, but the opportunity there is, like we heard through feedback, that school groups are camping on the showground lawn, and although that's camping, it's not camping in terms of being out in nature and in an existing landscape. So we see that as a great opportunity. In addition, existing Apex Park to have some improved facilities for landscaping, a comfort and shade. There's just really limited shade out there as well, so we think that needs to be improved. And also just trafficability. Obviously with busy times, there's a lot of vehicles moving around. There's also the stop route as well, so there's lots of different conflicting movements in busy times. So we see part of the master plan is improving access, improving people moving through in a safe manner that doesn't put anyone in jeopardy. So there's a role for that to play as well. In terms of the actual sort of detail within each of the precincts, I'll just run through this. Look, there is going to be question time at the end, and with the maps and diagrams all around the room, so happy to take questions and talk through things in a bit more detail once we get through the presentation. But just running through I think everyone can see things there. But basically, river boardwalk with shelters and seating, rehabilitated landscape along the edge of the Thomson, existing sheds and structures to Apex Park. We had proposed a dog off-leash park in this area here, and once again, I guess this is a really good illustration of how the master plan will evolve and change. But like if that's a dog off leash park, that's like a hockey field in terms of size, and it certainly doesn't need to be that big. But to also, I guess, to allay any fears about the finiteness of this master plan, we received some really strong feedback from the councillors initially about not being too keen on the dog off leash park through feedback and responses from constituents. So that was really interesting. The community feedback had that as quite a strong element, but I guess through the various stakeholder discussions we've had, like one element that was really interesting is that when the stock groups come through, and not to speak like a city slicker, but dogs and cattle don't mix, and they actually cause some friction with the cattle. So there's reasons why we could move that or should move that. So that's certainly something that we're looking at. Some other really good feedback that we received was about the inflatable water park, which is over here. Now, in discussion with council groups and other people that we've spoken to, the inflatable water park, which we think is a fantastic idea, it's done really, really well all over Queensland, all up and down the coastline, some really good examples. Like it's a pretty cool business opportunity for someone in town that could sort of put that up in high season. Great for tourism, great for school kids, great for different groups from surrounding locations to come to Longreach and use that facility. But I guess in our discussions it's in the wrong place. So that water park will be much better served on the western side of the Longreach Bridge. For obvious reasons, if we have our boat ramp, improved boat ramp facilities here and vessels are coming through, that there's very much a potential conflict there. So that's been a really clarifying thing for us in this trip, and something that we'll go back and change immediately, pending further feedback from the community. But one of the big changes that we're making is moving that water park to the western side. With these boardwalk facilities, we've got launch capability for kayaks, canoes. We got a lot of feedback. I personally got a lot of feedback about stand-up paddleboards being a big thing on the Thomson River as well. Lots of people are starting to do that. So having some facilities there to facilitate that will be really good. But one of the big items was actually improved beach facilities and beach access into the Thomson here. So we really see, I guess, the eastern side being that entry and exit point for vessels and vehicles and boats, potentially a pontoon or something in the future. But then having that relaxed sort of family setting on the western side, so you can actually slowly, gradually go into the Thomson and really make that a bit of a family spot as well. So if that was to be the case, then obviously the dog off leash would potentially move, and then the Apex Park could be beautified and made better. There's also teething issues which may bore people to death, but it's actually quite an important item that we've discovered over the last couple of days in terms of what we can actually develop first up. Tenure is essentially what's Crown land and what's land owned by council. So whilst you can change the development rights on Crown land and actually have rights to develop concepts and ideas as such as this, council's going to be limited in terms of what they can do from the outset of the project. But luckily, the Apex Park, potentially the launch facilities, there's a bit of a triangle that, if you can follow my cursor, that's essentially the area that the council can go in and change immediately. But that's something that's going to require more research and a strategy to get around those planning issues. But I guess I did go into a bit more detail on that because I guess it just shows the flexibility and I guess the willingness to listen and change and amend the plan as well, which is what these sessions are all about. It's really important to get feedback from the community so that we can just make this plan better and more, just a much better master plan for the region, for it to make more sense. In addition to those elements, we proposed a turning head, returning facility through here, and I guess once again that goes back to the idea that with improved and increased facilities down here, there's going to be more vehicles, more people, more movement. So we need to make sure that the trafficability of the space is improved as well. the roads are fit for purpose, they're the right size, they're the right width. You've got trailers with boats and vessels on the back. You've got buses delivering tourists to Smitty's, dinner cruises on the river. So it's really important that we make sure that this functions really well. We're not creating a black spot or an area that's that puts anyone in danger. So once again, that's another assessment piece that needs to be undertaken. We're really quite excited about the boat ramp facility as well and improving that. It's in it just needs a bit of improvement at the moment. We're actually thinking of looking at a much bigger facility there, or much better facility. And then you get into this parkland precinct, which is all on the eastern side of the Longreach Bridge. And then this is where, I guess, all the increased sort of play facilities and other elements are proposed. Playgrounds of regional significance on this site, a multi-use sort of lawn space over here, and that's the pop-up markets, and which scored very high on the community feedback. Increased landscaping, an amenities block. I'm a father of 3, and I know that whenever I go to a playground, within 30 seconds the kid needs to go to the bathroom. So you can't have a playground without having toilet amenities as well. Park shelters and car parking. And one of the distant ideas is whether eco lodges, on the back of increased popularity and identity of the master plan area, that there may be other opportunities for eco lodges in this space here. One of the elements that we're really excited about is this elevated sunset deck. So we have a perspective image that we can display as well. But the idea with this is that what we were really taken by is these iconic, beautiful views of the Thomson River, looking up and down, sunset views. And we thought of, from my experience, I've done a lot of work in Rockhampton, and they've got the waterfall in Kershaw Gardens, and the mayor was talking to me about the importance of that to the community. It's a place that grade 12s have their formal photos in front of. People get married and have their wedding photos in front of the waterfall. And so we're always looking for different places within townships that are of significance and create those memories from your childhood or growing up in a certain place. So we see this as a bit of an iconic structure, in the same way that the Qantas shelter and shade structure, the Stockman's Hall of Fame, you've got all these amazing buildings, and we see that as being, without being over the top, a really good facility for that could be implemented over the river. Great, an iconic place for photos, but also taking those sunset views as well and looking down the river. So there's been a fair bit of support and excitement about that idea as well. In addition, probably the only other sort of smaller ideas is just the rehabilitated edge and having these little pockets of little sand dunes essentially and beach access into the Thomson. We see those as places that families can take a picnic blanket and sort of set up on the river for the day and really go out there and enjoy themselves for a full day and have a full experience out there. So that's essentially summarises the river parklands. We do have a series of character images which just sort of, they're not exact, they're the character images, so they essentially sort of display what it may look like. Improved beach access, making sure that they're safe and easy for people to access the Thomson River, taking into account weed issues and other things like that, which we're fully aware of as well. How the iconic lookout could be. We don't see it as being a super expensive, completely over the top structure. We just see it doing its job in terms of a robust structure. This is an example from overseas where obviously the sun and shade aren't an issue, so we would certainly propose that has a shelter of some description over the top. This is the playgrounds that we did in Rockhampton. And it's probably a good little segue just in terms of, flood issues. We're well and truly aware of of the constraints that we're facing from a master plan perspective with flooding. But this is a really good example of flood resilient design. Just because it floods doesn't mean that we can't do anything. There's really good examples from all around the world, and luckily we have a really good example in Rockhampton. If anyone's been against the Fitzroy and the riverfront development, essentially everything from the embankment down floods. And this is where more research and analysis needs to be undertaken. But when Rockhampton floods, you generally get a week or 2 week long period of warning. So that then determines our plan of attack for how we defend the riverfront development. And this is something that went through that council. So everything's hardware and it's robust. In terms of the playgrounds, these canopy structures are all above flood level as well. So the way that the structure's been engineered is that it's all been structurally certified to withstand, I guess, the hydraulic, so the water flow and water movement coming down the Fitzroy. So, look, nothing's ever 100% resilient. You know, you're always going to have to get out, as I'm sure everyone's experienced in town, you're going to have to get out and hose things down and clean them up. But in general terms, this was a really successful outcome that has withseen some flood issues. So it's just one example, but that being said, Longreach isn't Rockhampton, and yesterday was really a great session with council and with Parks and Wildlife and a few other groups in terms of us getting a better understanding about how it does flood in Longreach. You know, when do the really big events happen? Are they every 20, 30, 40 years? When it does flood every second or third year, is it a slow rise and a slow fall? So all of these issues play into what we can and can't do from an infrastructure perspective. And that goes to how barbecues are placed, where they're placed, where a shelter's placed. There's a lot of design that still needs to go into this, but I can assure you that it's certainly possible, and we definitely would not be recommending anything or council would be putting anything in the grounds that's only going to see the light of day for a 12-month period and get wiped out by floods. So we certainly appreciate that that's an issue, but please be rest assured that there are ways and means to design with that and for those conditions. I guess one of the aspects of the lookout is the potential for evening light exhibitions and stargazing, which is also similarly important and popular in the feedback. The potential sort of character image of how that river walk may be along the Thomson River, and then launch facilities for paddleboarders. This brings us to the Indigenous Heritage Trail Precinct. We're actually really excited about this component. This is where we see a big opportunity for a different type of local and tourism opportunity within the master plan. Generally speaking, it's a pretty harsh and unforgiving place within the master plan, and we're also similarly aware of the black soil issues and challenges that are presented with rehabilitation sort of techniques, knowing that there's been many trials attempted and there's been lots of learnings on that front. So once again, we're certainly aware of that. But we see this as a good opportunity to really explore not just the Indigenous culture of the township and the surrounding area, but really as a celebration of local flora, local fauna, the local geology. I know this may seem like a bit of a random sort of map of colours and patterns, but we did a fair bit of research in terms of a macro scale view of Longreach and the surrounding area, and we can do some diagrams to illustrate this better, but effectively this is the Thomson River running through the site, and then this is Longreach Township, and so it's almost like a macro scale view of Longreach expressed into this parkland. So the idea is that we have this discovery centre, community centre, multi-function place that's for education. You can do a whole bunch of different things. There's other reasons why we're doing that as well from a funding source perspective. The car park facilities. And the idea is that if we have this heritage art trail, Indigenous trail, then that leads to what we're calling the Longreach Observatory, which is a lookout tower. So we see this as a beacon, as an element for wayfinding, potentially being seen from Longreach itself, but getting up and actually seeing the township and seeing the amazing sort of landscape, the beautiful long views. When we were up here last time, we were lucky enough to go out to Winton and go up onto the hill where the dinosaur museum is. Just those staggering, long, distant views into the distance. And there's something really beautiful and poetic and gorgeous about that. So we love this idea that as a beacon, a tourism beacon, having this observatory. But once you're up there, you get to learn about the soils and the bird life, the flora, fauna, like what actually is central Queensland in terms of the landscape. So a real celebration of place, which there are some fantastic museums in town, but we think that this is a different experience of what Longreach and the surrounding area is. And then a community green, so obviously with any type of infrastructure that we have here, there's also opportunities to bring people together, night gazing, Christmas carols, outdoor cinemas. There's a plethora of opportunities that it's really a multi-use space that anyone can use for any type of program using the facilities within the Discovery Centre. Trails, a few boardwalks, shelters, seating that surround the space that just provides additional opportunity for people to get out and explore the area. And look, given the constraints with the landscaping, once again, we certainly acknowledge that and are aware of the challenges that we're faced from a rehabilitation perspective. We certainly don't expect it to be as beautiful, lush, tropical landscape. We certainly are aware of the constraints that we face with landscape out here. But this is a really good example from the Australian Garden in Victoria. It's one of the most popular gardens that people tour and travel to in Australia, and it's really it's identified through its sculptural forms in soils and gravels and stones, and less so about the vegetation. So if you sort of take that as a bit of an exemplar of how this space could potentially come together, we think that's a really good idea. Because once again, it comes down to maintenance. If we're putting something in the ground and we're expecting it to do something, but you need council ops teams to be out there watering it and maintaining it, then we've failed straight away. So you can still do things that are really beautiful, interesting, are very, very popular and are sought after around Australia and from an international tourist market without having to spend copious amounts of money. We see a really good opportunity to integrate some local Aboriginal art and tell the stories of our Indigenous culture, pre-European settlement, but also tell the story of post-European settlement as well. We were discussing yesterday the Chinese aspect, when there was a big Chinese population. One of the gentlemen was telling us about all of the Chinese medicine bottles that he's finding on the northern side. So these are rich stories that go beyond the Stockman and the Qantas and tell a deeper, richer story that everyone can potentially contribute to. And we do that through signage and didactics. So signage and wayfinding can actually sort of direct people around, tell you where they are, but also tell stories that whether it's Indigenous or post-European history. The Discovery Centre, once again, we're not here to say let's spend $60 million on some massive big structure that'll win architectural awards. It's about something that's of place, that is really required by local community groups. We were talking to, I forget the lady's name, from Desert Channels yesterday. Leanne, and they've been looking for a place for 17 years to set up a facility that sort of educates and informs people about the work that they do. But once again, can that wrap into an Indigenous interpretive story place, sustainability? Like, there's so many amazing stories that can be told. And once again, without sounding crass, there's also funding opportunities for a lot of these things as well. So, I guess the goal of this project is that it's not going to be funded by council, so we need to seek opportunities for funding outside of the council coffers. And these are the opportunities where we're in a post-COVID world. Local tourism, state tourism is of such importance. People aren't out there spending $30,000 travelling to Disney World with their 3 kids, but that means they can go on an extravagant trailer Central Queensland tour. And they may only spend 10 grand, but they're going to do it with a bang. So this is the world that we sort of live in at the moment. And then, state governments and federal governments are looking at these opportunities in different light now. So having this master plan is a really important first step in actually seeking some external funding, which is really important, beyond the fact that this is a really exciting thing for the local community. There's also opportunities for Aboriginal farming, agriculture and land management, so actually telling the story about how Indigenous, the stories of the land and how it has been utilised. And this is just a very, not to say that this is what it would look like, but the observatory doesn't just have to be like a fireman's tower, it can actually be something beautiful, speak to the vernacular of, the architectural language of Longreach, whether that's corrugated iron, timbers and stones, but it needs to be a place which is really important. And the third precinct is probably, there's not too much to talk about, because effectively, once again, it's a celebration of the existing land that's there. It used to be an old quarry as well, which we were informed about, so you've got the varying topography within this precinct, a bit of undulation, some really good vegetation on there as well. It's probably the best quality vegetation within the master plan area. So we saw it as this really cool way of being able to activate these pockets and create these true outback camping experiences within the precinct. It obviously needs a bit more testing, that we were thinking it wouldn't it be amazing if you could actually use that quarry site and activate it as a wetland or a billabong. And so when people are camping in here with their swags, see there's a dad takes his 2 boys down there, has a camping experience for a night or two. If you do it next to a billabong or a wetland, that would be a really great experience. So that generally sort of encapsulates the majority of that area, but also about Apex Park and the existing camp event site. Lots of really good discussion yesterday about access in, access out, providing additional shade, clusters of tree planting, and that's something we could potentially do really early, is get trees in nice and early, because I guess the beauty of the master plan is a forward plan for 20 years, and trees don't unfortunately grow overnight in terms of providing any level of shade, irrespective of the challenges we have with soil conditions. And the other component is signage and wayfinding. It's actually quite hard to find to the Thomson River as well, in terms of knowing where it is and how to get there. So having a really strong signage and wayfinding strategy is really important. But at the same time, not investing in that until there's something to tell in a deeper way. So just some I guess, character imagery of, what we see those camping experiences being, with the potential to have them, some water experience, billabongs or wetlands, lots of walking trails, really sort of rustic and natural, and once again, any form of signage to be quite sensitive to the language of Longreach. Not to say that is the signage. So that's effectively, a key rundown of the precincts and all the various bits and pieces that we're proposing. So what Thursday, yesterday and today are about is, first and foremost, explaining the master plan and commencing a period of feedback. We can talk to that in terms of the feedback and how we're going to do that. But our process, once that feedback comes back, we're also thinking about how does this get off the ground? We're really cognizant of the fact that these master plans, we don't want it to be death by 1,000 master plans. Master plans are great, but they're only good if they get enacted and get movement and buy-in. And the only way that we can get that buy-in is if the community's right behind it, which is why this whole process has been based on community feedback and really responding to the brief that's been provided to us by the community. So if there are elements in here, please speak up. And I think yesterday was a really good sort of, it was a great process because everyone told us what they didn't like, and what doesn't work. And in some ways, they're quite easy wins. It's just moving a few things around. But by making those changes, it's just a much better quality master plan. And once again, if you all believe in it and help drive it forward and support council and the mayor in delivering this, then it'll become a reality much sooner. So our process has been about identifying what the key projects are, like what are the quick wins, what are the high investments elements, what is the long-term vision, and I guess enacting an active program to make sure that it actually happens. This might be through an initial tree planting or improvements to Apex Park. It might even be the new boat ramp facility that's staged over a period of time. But there's small things that can happen. We need to do a survey, we need to do a few more hydrological assessments about flooding. There's all these little bits and pieces that need to be implemented over the process, and obviously everything costs money, but as I said, the goal of council is to make sure that this is funded by external parties. So that's, and we did have a stab, and it's wrong, as we found out yesterday, in terms of what we can and can't do in terms of timing, but we did have a crack at an implementation and staging plan. So we really wanted to focus on this sort of parkland space. There's nothing more exciting than getting a really high quality playground into the area and really sort of forging ahead with the master plan and providing something for families. But it may just be that we do the boat launch facilities first, as an option. Maybe priority 2 is right, and then we're developing the beach facilities and moving the dog off leash and improving some Apex Park facilities. So once again, this may not be the right approach, but it's something that we wanted to put in front of council and stakeholders, the community, and the implementation teams within council. Because what it does do is it allows us to identify those streams of funding. It allows Mitchell to sweet talk, Prime Minister, or go into various avenues and actually seek out funding. And you need a master plan in order for that to happen. So that's probably it for me. There's just a process of discussion and questions, and we'll pass around the mic if people can ask questions of any of the team.
Have we got any questions around the room? Sure. If you just wanted to state your name as well, just so I can record them.
I was just interested whether the other one, the Eastern project, is completely off the agenda now, or whether there will be some improvements there, such as access to the river, better beaches, maybe more vegetation, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. Yeah, because like shelters, but it's all minor embellishments, nothing too over the top. Because I think the more we do, the more we take away from the beauty of the space. So it's really about protecting the beaches, shelters, the sort of program of sort of in collection and litter collection with the council. The last thing we want to do is, the more you open it up, the more you invite rubbish and use, and so it's really about finding that nice balance between shelters, tables and benches, potentially barbecue facilities. So it's really minor embellishments.
I was curious where the edge of that one is. That the old college farm? Is that the area east of the college, the old college farm?
Yeah.
Brown fence.
Yeah.
That's the college farm. So it's separate.
The centre bit.
The same round bit, it's called the sensitive irrigation.
Oh, right. So it actually includes the riverfront of the college park.
College don't know.
The fence would like to have the water on. We're going to go for a swim meet.
Hey, my name's Nicole. And if you have to dog park, could you possibly move it to the riverfront and have dog park or beach? Because a lot of people take dogs down to the mom or like river or somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, the reason why we did put it there is because twofold essentially. The first reason is because when the tourists come, council told us that they get like 30 phone calls about where's the dog off leash park, because there's little chihuahuas and people travel with their pups, so they're looking for a space to have a dog off leash. So that was reason one, and the second reason was because dog off leash parks are about community. They bring people together. I do a lot of new communities, residential work, and the first thing we put in parks is a dog off leash because it's an opportunity for people to talk and meet each other's dogs and play. The location is probably up for grabs in terms of where we put that, and that's a good suggestion. So yeah, it's like Wynnum Beach in Brisbane. We take our pup there all the time so we can go and have a swim. So yeah.
Just to add to that as well, I think something we did talk about earlier on was whether or not we had this fully fenced enclosed dog park community caravan area, and whether or not there was an opportunity to have more of an off-leash on the beach area, but down towards the eastern end of the city area, where it's more of a community focused anyway. So that was something we could talk about, which would be an option.
And a lot of people do in that eastern precinct. A lot of people do take their animals down there to jump in the truck. And running on the riverbank and then swimming across it.
Just to clarify that, the council looking at the road ramp made the park is what we're concentrating first. We're not sure.
We're looking at all options. That was really a discussion out of the land tenure issue. So, if that makes sense, we have a small opportunity to do stuff now. So there is funding money that's being secured. So it's really about how and where, what's the best use for that in an immediate response. But we're quite limited into where that is, and we just identified that the boat ramps not in the best shape, and it's still popular, and obviously it's in terms of use, we've been told it's not super busy, but still it's just an opportunity that's been raised in our discussions over the last 2 days as being a potential place for improvement, which could happen within 6-12 months.
Can I just add to that, Glen? So just to add to the tenure scenario, so in that triangle, and I'll try and keep this really laden, so in that triangle precinct, predominantly where Apex Park is, I don't like this word, but we have control of that area. So we have the tenure over that land in a reserve situation. The stuff that's outside of it to the right of the boat ramp, we would need to apply to get that tenure. Now, that's just a process, and it's just time. So one of the key things of doing the consultation is to get that feedback about how do you move that priority list that Glen showed. Why that's really important is that practically when the Mayor and I walk into Canberra, for example, it's so powerful to have a master plan, because what you're actually doing is you're walking in and rather than being a wish list or a dream, there's actually a definitive plan. So it's a lot easier for them to commit to. And then if you're really clear about saying, well, this is what we want to do in the first 3 steps, then that process becomes a lot easier. So there'll be no issues about us getting that tenure, it's just a process of time. Where the government will say no over that Crown land tenure is if you want to do something that is high-scale commercial, right? So if you wanted to build a hotel near the river, they'd go no, because it's all commercial. But when they can see that it's for community use and it's for the wider good, then 9 times out of 10 they're going to say yes, but it's just time because it's native title, it's contracts, etc., etc. So we've already secured some money for this plan through the government to spend. So it's just about fine-tuning the priorities in a really slow, concerted, measured way rather than jumping in. So that the first thing you do, you know that there's a logical link to the next thing you do, rather than you do something there and you do something there, it looks bits and pieces of everything, hence why we're putting together a plan. Is that's a fair outline, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's all about avoiding a fool that works.
Yeah.
Because if we spend 50, 100, 200k in one spot, what a master plan does is it says, okay, we're going to spend it there, but it's there for the long haul. You're not spending it somewhere and it's all going to get demolished because you write a new master plan or, there's new ideas and then sort of higgledy way. So that's the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, congratulations. It really is a fabulous plan. But I think that if we're going to prioritise use of the river, I think it's got to be user-friendly to the locals. I mean, it's lovely to have great facilities for tourists and passing trade and so on. But what we badly need is, with limited funding, make it user-friendly for the locals. We're here 24/7. 5 generations, and clearly the most important project was with the survey was the inflatable, swimming areas safe for kids. You can go out to the river any time and you have people sitting on the beach saying, "Gosh, I wish we could take our kids in the river," and yet on this the presentation today, it looked like it's going to be moved to the western side, which is absolutely correct. But it seemed to be more of a throwaway line, like, some commercial people might run it. But I think that the priorities that with limited funding you can do are the boat ramp, obviously. The viewing deck would be wonderful. But definitely make it easier or more user-friendly for families with children. They can go actually swimming just down from Apex Park. Be a bit of work with the pumps and so on.
Yeah.
But I think that's the other thing that's important too, I think, with the Outback campground, I live on the western side of the river, and there's got to be somewhere safe for our kids to go, the teenagers, the people on bikes, develop that area. The park and ambulance is great, but there's lots of, facilities that could be done later. But I think the 3 things that you really need to think about with limited funding is make it user-friendly for the locals, and then we'll attract more families to live here. What you do on the weekends, you take your kids to the river, and then the boardwalk around the western side there would be absolutely fabulous, and you probably do that for very limited funding. Admittedly, you've got to have a master plan, that's brilliant, but and it's some great ideas there, but to make it initially, you'll get funding, and you can make this a more friendly place or a happier place to be when people live out here, to do something with their kids in the weekend and in safety, and you'd attract all the families that are coming out here. They can go to the swimming pool, but the swimming pool's everywhere. Why wouldn't you make that a major attraction of Longreach? Because more and more we're seeing more families on the road and taking sabbaticals and going out there, and this would be a real focus. So that those 3 things I think would absolutely be a great starting point for your plan.
Thanks for that, Grant. Look, I think that's been the best outcome of the last 2 days is the response that we've gotten in terms of how to activate this place. The key thing, first thing we went to on Monday is move this over here, short of the boardwalk over here and have a beach section through here. I think that just makes amazing sense. And it isn't, everything costs money, but it isn't a huge cost in terms of the beach access. But I think the other really important aspect is about maintenance. So every decision that we make, because obviously council's budgets are limited in terms of what they can do, so every decision needs to be done with a clear understanding of the not just the capital investment, but the ongoing investment as well. So that's a change that we're going to immediately make, but within the realms of understanding what is the ongoing maintenance costs, because I always use the analogy of community gardens. Unless you have someone there running the garden and maintaining it and keeping it clean, as soon as that person goes, with all the best intentions, it just becomes an absolute mess. And that's the last thing we would have all failed. That's the case.
And as far as ratepayer is concerned, the money will be some effort, work, employment, the council, the ratepayers are feeling that this is something we can use, you know, this is something we can do, it's funding will probably be available, it's our river initially, it's others to enjoy when they visit, but it's for us to enjoy, you know, and that if you focus on the smaller area like that, then you've got, all this will follow. But to get the community behind you, I think you probably need to do something really tangible initially.
Yeah.
John Miller, are they still going to live that clear up for me?
Let's leave it like that, right? Are they going to raise the weir?
Yeah, be talking about it.
Yeah, thanks, John. So at the moment, maybe one of the councillors would like to speak to this, but in really simple terms, within the next 2 weeks, the senior officers of council are giving a full briefing to the full council about where we're at with that project. To put a number on that, if and when there was a decision to raise the weir, you're looking at a project around $10 million. So it's a huge project. So to answer your question, could I stand here today and say that we're going to raise the weir? The honest answer to that is I don't have an answer, because we need to give the presentation to the councillors, and then the councillors need to assess it and then decide, well, yes, it is the right decision to progress. But that decision, one way or the other, and I'm sure the councillors will have a view, that will be addressed within the next couple of months. And if, and I stress the word, John, if the decision is to go ahead with that project, then we obviously have another process to go through to go and source that money, both through the federal and state government, because we don't have $10 million. So that's where it's at the moment. It's well and truly on the agenda, but is there a definitive answer today? No, because respectfully, we have to put that presentation to the councillors and let them make that call. But I'm sure the councillors here today may wish to add to that.
Yeah, it's just that we did talk about boat ramps, people lift the weir up there, that's going to be bugger ring to make the railway ramp for the boat.
Yeah. It's probably fair to say that the decision on the weir, while it does have a connection to the master plan, is very much a separate decision in its own right.
Yeah, right.
Will that impact on your infrastructure decisions now? You raise the water level, which, like, if you put your boardwalks in and then you raise the weir, your launch area.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the master plan, is that that's the intent. So if the weir does potentially raise, then we respond and react. And when the development of that design, because this is just one phase, the next phase is like detailed design, conceptual design, and that's when you take into account all those parameters. So the master plan is saying that the boardwalk system would be fantastic, the beach would be fantastic, but if the weir is on the cards and it's a potential parameter to design to, then that will happen when the process takes place.
Just to pick up what you said, Rosemary, too, and I'm sure the councillors will be fine with me talking about this, is that whether it's the planting of one tree or whether it is the installation of barbecues, the council will be profoundly responsible in each single decision about that ongoing maintenance, right? We understand how to get that. So, to give you assurance, we actually have a discipline within council that has been implemented since I've come here, is that we have a thing called the project decision framework. Anything that is $50,000 or above that we are going to spend, we run a full business case. And we give all the options to council around whole of life costs. And if you think about that in really simple terms, and it's not Longreach Council, all councils have fallen into this trap. And I'll give you an example. The federal government will release a round of grant money, and a council could say, well, that's great, let's go and build X, right? And it's really exciting, you go and build it, and then you go, oh, now we've got to keep that thing and maintain it for the next 30 years, and in often the case, it's really expensive. So with each decision within this plan, there will be a very thorough, detailed, and comprehensive assessment of every single decision that is considered around whole of life costings and maintenance, right? That's really important. The great thing in the world we live in now, which Glen has alluded to on many occasions, is that there are so many smart things you can do now around design and construction that really mitigates against that. And if you look at it and you go, it's too expensive, you don't do it. So there's a lot of options, and I just can't stress that enough, that the two components is we're going to grant funding, not council money, or some private investment, and secondly, that we'll be acutely responsible around the maintenance. And just that final thing about the water park. The thing about tourism and all that is that the great thing, not only does it provide livability for our own residents, but it also provides jobs. Because for every amount of people that's coming into town, that expands the job network in town. And the other big thing that we haven't spoken about here, beyond tourism, it will also attract day trips. So if you've got something like that, you know, people from Winton would come over for the day, all within that 2 to 3 hour drive, and that's again, driving money and enhanced viability to our businesses in town as well. So right at the start, I said it's livability for our own people day to day. I mean, I could see myself getting up on Saturday morning, getting $6 grand and go and spending the day there at barbecues. So it's giving that structure and services to our local residents, but also the services and structure for people who visit our town as well, which creates jobs.
I think that's like the first meeting, that's what we talked about, was making it realistic because of the ongoing maintenance and that sort of thing. And I think that's the good thing, living out on where we see firsthand what council don't do or can't do, and that's the biggest worry, living out there. If we get all these great things for the community, well then they won't want to go out there when it's not maintained or it's not what have you. That's our biggest thing, is keeping it just simple and realistic so that the council can maintain that. Like the bleach at the moment, well, it doesn't even get cleaned up until we go through it. We can't, you've got to walk through hard to get through it. So we've been through that for years, and that's another big thing I think council hopefully will really promise us that, they will keep it realistic and what we can maintain without going over the top.
Realistic is an excellent word. We're not trying to build something that is pipes.
And it comes back to, I know it's just words, but it's important when it's in a master plan about adaptability. Because if we don't remain adaptive to council situation and changing, that, so it is embedded in the master plan. That's a key core principle, which, as Mitchell has noted, is already part of their process and decision making. So we couldn't agree more, because it's about the future success of these places. It's all good for them to be beautiful and flashy for the first 3, 6 months, 12 months. It's what it is in 10, 15, 20 years time.
Through you, sir, to our CEO and one of the councillors,
At our last public meeting, I asked the question about dredging the river for trees and everything else that goes into it. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been done since '98. I would think there would be a lot of rubbish in the river still. I would like to know, can anybody tell me, has there been any progress on that thought of dredging it to get rid of the rubbish out of it, or reselling it?
Not at this stage, no.
Nothing has been done.
Not at the moment. We'll update that in the next community forum and our engineers there as well. He'll give about far more detailed answer to me about what he can and can't do. And those next community forums will take place within the next couple of months.
Well, I really think before anything goes in, I mean, yes, do the boat ramp and have it smart, because that will serve everybody. But I really think we have to look at those few suggestions. It makes a big difference to the river.
Well, thanks for raising it.
Hey, thanks very much. I think this is a great plan that you put together. But one of the most important things of this plan from the beginning, of when we sort of the previous council and this council, is preserving the natural attributes and the ecology of the river. That has to be your most highest priority. I know all these plans you've got here are aspirational, but you must preserve the natural attributes. If you're going to go to Canberra, you're going to demonstrate how you're going to do this on an ongoing basis, and I think that is absolutely paramount, number one priority, is how you demonstrate preserving it.
Yep, completely agree. Yep.
Just to add to the conversation about the ongoing maintenance of the master plan, I guess as officers, this process has identified with us that overall for our parks and open spaces and pools, that we need to have an overall strategy, that we don't try and, for instance, we wouldn't be looking to, well, I wouldn't think so, to be big numbers, but if putting a water park in a Longreach pool would be something that we consider when we're doing this, or the skate park, we're not going to bring put in a heap of barbecues and shelters and things like that when we've got it here. So I think we just understand that we need to really strategise on what each of these areas that we have in our community are, and definitely not duplicate or create so much extra work that we can't maintain it. So we're definitely looking at that.
Thanks, Kimberly. Who's Bo?
I just keep back to breath.
So for those who don't know, Kimberly is our acting Director of Community and Cultural Services, so she runs Parks and Guards. So I'm just going to hand over to Simon Cutler, who's our Executive Officer of Economic Development and Public Affairs, and he'll just talk you through what happens today in terms of the opportunity to give further feedback.
Sure. So I think with the plan, we've also got the forms here that you can fill in for public comment. But basically, the document is live on the website now to download. You can go there now and download it, a copy, and take it home and read it. I think there's been some handed out today, but if you have missed out or if you want to refer it to others, then you can go to our website and download that. I'll be posting a link on our Facebook page pretty much after this meeting. On the website where you download the master plan, the next button down takes you through to an online survey where you can actually make any comments that you have. There's also an option to download a printable version of the survey, which is essentially what we've handed out today. So you can print it, fill it in, hand it over the counter at a council office, pop it in the mail to us, scan it, put in an email. There's a number of different ways to provide that feedback to us. And the public comment period is open until the 15th of March. So it's Monday the 15th of March, close of business. And that's the time frame to get your comments into. So you can take the plan home, have a good look at it, have a thorough read of everything in it, and make some any comments and feedback that you want to give us in a real considered way. Following that 15th of March, all that feedback will be collated and will be fed back to Urbis, and then Council and Urbis in consultation will consider all that feedback, and a final draft will be brought back to the April meeting of the Council for formal adoption. So that's the time frame that we're working to, is to bring this back to get it adopted at the April meeting. So 15th of March. May date, remember.
Thanks very much, Simon. Just before I invite Councillor Nunn to come back and wrap up, here's the opportunity for any final questions. Yes, Rosemary?
You talk about stock route in that precinct here. The designated stock route is on the northern side of the river. But occasionally you'll have mobs that will have to come, legally or illegally, across the old reach. And I don't know where the stock route goes on the Longreach side of the river, but that would be probably 1 in 100-year experience, but I'm not sure where the stock route goes on the Longreach side of the river.
Our understanding from the last couple of days is that it comes from this east-west connection, and I think at the moment it's like that, and then they go that way. So maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the feedback that we've received over the last couple of days. I always think about analogies to movies, but I think of like the movie City Slickers, where I see it as a massive tourism opportunity. But the other feedback that we've got is that there are realities to stock moving through, which I don't witness and haven't seen before in terms of how cattle act, because they're not used to people and caravan trailers and dogs. And so we see it as a massive opportunity, if that's what you're alluding to, Rosemary. But at the same time, there's definite things that we need to protect the cattle from humans and humans from cattle and from stockmen that have guns and other things like that.
We're not cowboys, steady on that.
Sorry?
We're not cowboys, steady on that. Yeah. Well, the designated stock route actually runs along Starlight River Road, and comes out to the sale yards area, and in that precinct there. But I know being mobs that have come across the bridge to go to Ilfracombe on that through Goodbury past Oakley. So I don't know what actually happens to the stock route. But the designated stock route is along Starlights Road. We've had that country out there for about 40 years, so but that probably needs establishing. But I think, in my experience, some of the drovers have taken a bit of liberty and out of necessity, and probably had to bring the cattle across, but it's not a very event that happens very often. But I could be corrected on that. But that is something that you probably need to look at as well.
Yeah, no, that's feedback on that.
Thanks, Rosemary. Yeah, look, that's a great example of it. There's so many variables that you have to take into consideration for every single decision. That's one of them. So, like yesterday, President Bell had a long discussion with Jeff Newton, who handles our local laws, to get a deep understanding of that. And we talked to other landowners who are, close to that stock route, depending on your pronunciation. So, again, acutely aware that we don't start down make a decision without doing a lot of research and due diligence. Ladies and gentlemen, I just call on Councillor Nunn to close. Can I say thank you so much for giving up your Saturday? It's a really important process, and over to Councillor Nunn.
Thank you, Mitchell. Again, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your very detailed report. You explained it really well. I don't expect anything less of you, Glen, but very, very well done. You've all got something to think about, read. There's, I think, still a few copies there. Please read it, have your say, and get your feedback into us. I can just assure you, whatever council decisions are made, council will be doing it with very careful consideration, taking into account what's been discussed today, what feedback received, what any other information or situation that arises. So council will be very considered in their deliberations. Thank you again for coming and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.